So here's the big question. You're age 65, you have $1 million and you're ready to retire. So can you retire comfortably and on your terms? That's the example we're going to look at today. We're going to look at Lois and Clark, who's just retired at age 65. They have no debt, they own their home outright, and together they're already receiving about $4,000 a month from Social Security. But here's what they want to know. Are we in good shape? How much can we really spend? And how do we make sure we don't run out of money? And if you've ever wondered the same thing, this video is for you. So we're going to be walking through their case study step by step using real planning software to show you what retirement can look like when you've saved well and planned well. Now, before we dive in, my name is Phil. I'm a certified financial planner. And on this channel, we talk about retirement planning, investing, and building the kind of wealth that gives you freedom. And if that's what you're working towards, I'd love for you to subscribe and check out the other videos that I've linked below. All right, let's get to Lois and Clark's situation. Both of them are age 65, and they've decided that this year they're officially retired. They don't owe anything on their home, which is huge, and Social Security is providing about $4,000 a month combined, or $48,000 per year. So right away, their baseline income is already covering a good portion of that $6,000 a month lifestyle that they're aiming for. Here's where the big questions come in. What happens when they start pulling from the retirement accounts? Will it last? Can they spend more in the early years and still be okay? Let's walk through those numbers. Here's where Lois and Clark are starting off. They have about $1 million portfolio, and they have $250,000 in a joint taxable brokerage account, regular investment account. They have $500,000 in a traditional IRA rolled over from Clark's old 401k, and they have $250,000 in a Roth IRA. They are very well tax diversified going into retirement. Now, when I run their baseline plan, we see an 85% probability of success. Let me pause right here because this is one of the most misunderstood numbers in retirement planning, the Monte Carlo analysis, or probability of success. An 85% success rate doesn't mean they've got an 85% chance of living happily ever after and a 15% chance of total disaster. That is absolutely not what that means. Instead, what it really is saying is in 85% of the simulated scenarios, Lois and Clark actually didn't spend enough money. They could have enjoyed life a little bit more. In 15% of the scenarios, adjustments would have needed to be made. And that's where guardrails come in, which I'll show you later. So 85% is very strong, but it also tells us, let's look a little bit deeper and stress test a little bit. Here we can stress test a few scenarios, and we can see that baseline scenario of about 85%. And if markets were to drop immediately by 40%, that would have a huge impact to that probability of success. Taxes, not a huge deal because of how well they've saved and where they've saved. And we can see a few of the other stress test scenarios, but let's run some very specific scenarios. What would happen if Lois and Clark decided that they wanted to spend a little bit more on retirement? Instead of $6,000 per month lifestyle, they wanted $7,000 a month, or an extra $1,000. Well, that extra $1,000 a month doesn't sound like much, but if we stretch that over decades, it makes a huge difference, which we can see in the change of the probability of success. Their portfolio spends down faster, and suddenly that long-term picture looks less secure. This shows how sensitive retirement really is to spending, and it's why we need to stress test your retirement plan. Another factor that we need to consider is healthcare. Now, Lois and Clark are already 65, so they're on Medicare, but healthcare is still one of the biggest expenses in retirement. Premiums, out-of-pocket cost, dental, vision, and then later in life, costs often rise again because of long-term care or just more frequent medical needs. That's why we use what's called the retirement spending smile. You tend to spend more early on when you've got more health and energy, travel, hobbies, lifestyle, and then expenses dip in the middle years. And then later, as healthcare ramps up, costs rise again. So Lois and Clark need to plan not just for steady expenses, but for these natural shifts over time. Let me pause here for a quick favor. If this kind of walkthrough is helpful, hit the like button so more people can find it, and drop me a comment. If you were in Lois and Clark's shoes, would you work longer? Would you spend more in the early years? Would you retire? I'd love to hear what you would do in this situation. Let's take a look at travel. We all think about traveling when we go into retirement. What if Lois and Clark want to take full advantage of the first 10 years in retirement and, let's say, spend $12,000 per year on vacations? When I model that in, yes, their probability of success dips a bit, but the important thing is they can still do it. And that's the point of planning. It's not about saying, no, you can't travel. It's about showing Lois and Clark, if you do, here's how it plays out, and here's how we adjust down the road if we need to. Here's another scenario, working longer. What if Clark had worked just 2 years more before retiring? This one is always surprising to people. 2 more years of income means more savings going in, fewer years of withdrawals coming out, and more compounding time for the portfolio. And when I run that, suddenly the whole plan shifts from solid to thriving. They could travel more, spend more, and still leave a good cushion behind. Or maybe considering part-time income. Maybe Lois or Clark doesn't want full-time work, but what if they brought in just $20,000 or $30,000 a year for a few years doing something they truly enjoy? That's why my definition of retirement is not just we stop working, we don't do anything. It's simply we are working because we want to, not because we have to. So this could be a passion income project for one of them. Most people think that's not going to move the needle, but watch what happens. Now, it's not the $20,000 itself that bumped up the probability of success. It's the fact that for those years, they don't have to pull as much from the portfolio. That extra compounding time can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to their long-term picture. This is one of the most overlooked levers in retirement planning. Now, let me point out something really powerful about Lois and Clark's situation. They entered retirement tax diversified. That means in the first decade of retirement, they're projected to pay $0 in federal income tax. Yes, that $85,000 per year of spending, no federal income tax bill. I actually just posted an in-depth video showing exactly how this works, how to structure withdrawals to generate 6 figures of income while paying nothing in federal taxes. I'll link that video down below if you want to go check it out. This is why tax diversification and having a withdrawal strategy is such a game changer. Now let's circle back to that Monte Carlo 85%, because here's the truth, retirement is not static. It's not you succeed or you fail. That's way too rigid. That's where guardrails planning comes in. Instead of hoping you're in the 85% group, you put in place dynamic boundaries. If markets fail, you dial spending back slightly. In this example, they dial back about $350 a month or 5%, which would give the portfolio an opportunity to recover. When markets do well, you can increase withdrawals. So in this example, they hit the upper guardrail. They could increase their spending an additional $1,000 or $1,480 in this case. That's what makes a plan resilient. It adapts with you as long as you're willing to adapt with the plan. So where does this leave Lois and Clark? They've got no debt, a paid-off home, and Social Security covering their baseline lifestyle. With guardrails in place, they can enjoy the early years with confidence. And with smart tax planning, they're paying no federal income tax for the first decade of retirement. This also gives them huge tax planning opportunities. And that's not luck. That's planning, and it's exactly why running these scenarios matters so much. And if you're asking yourself the same questions, am I in good shape? How much can I spend? What's the earliest I can comfortably retire? This is what I help clients answer every day. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like, subscribe so you don't miss future case studies, and share it with someone you'd like to retire alongside, because it's always more fun with friends. And don't forget, education is how we start. Planning is how we build, and execution is how we obtain freedom. So, like and follow to navigate your wealth and elevate your life. Thank you for watching.